Welcome back to another edition of Fitness in VR, and as you've just found out, this week's game is Sprint Vector from Servius. It's one of their original titles. It's a really very popular game made in multiplayer essentially, and it's really going to be kind of like a futuristic sports game. As you can see, I am joined by Polish Paul. Hi. Hello. Paul, how you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. Hope everyone's doing well.
If it looks like we're in the same clothes, we're not. Don't pay attention.
It's been a week.
It's
just wearing the same clothes all the time.
Definitely been a full week. But yeah, and so in Sprint Vector, you can race, jump, climb. So it's an interesting game because we've been talking about, obviously the theme of this is fitness in VR. So with Sprint Vector, you're kind of using different motions. You've got a skate motion when you're kind of doing this, but you can also you can grip up and clamber around. You kind of leaping on the spot, things like that. So there's a real kind of variety in movement, which is a bit different to Box VR, where essentially it's more of a static kind of movement where you're moving and weaving like that. So it's a different approach. But obviously the interesting thing as well with Sprint Vector is it's not actually designed as an exercise fitness game. But it's
essentially it's racing game, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing with it, I suppose. We were talking about it. We briefly talked about it on the last edition. How a game isn't necessarily tailored to be an exercise experience, but actually it's a very physical game. And when you take the headset off, you're probably caked in sweat.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But yeah, so you're on a massive race course in Sprint Vector. One of the really cool things about it, it's kind of got a fluid locomotion system. So obviously one of the big problems people tend to have with VR, they tend to say that it makes them feel a bit nauseous and sick. Sprint Vector's kind of been designed to basically not make you feel nauseous and sick, and kind of feel a bit more comfortable and just feel less worried about kind of dizzy spells and things like that.
Yeah, they added this movement to stop people feeling sick, and I think there was first ones to introduce this body movement in virtual reality as well. And to say it was one of first game to introduce that, it's one of what I'm hearing. It's one of the games that still does it the best.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? It came out, a couple of years ago now, so it's not a brand new game. But when you have a game that kind of establishes its movement system and it's still so effective even today, I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? How no one has really kind of evolved it, or if they haven't evolved it, they haven't quite mastered it to the same level.
Yeah, definitely. And when this game first released, it was so popular. I remember when it was 2017. I think it was one of early PlayStation VR games, and it was such a big release. So as well, first racing game as well for PSVR at least. So it was something that people really enjoyed, and still I think it still got community active to this day.
I mean, from your perspective, because you play a lot of VR games, I mean, your channel is essentially dedicated to that. How did you ever feel nauseous to begin with, and kind of do you still feel nauseous at times with VR?
No, I never really had problems with motion sickness at all. Even if I play on PC and I play some super demanding game and my frame rate drops to 25 frames per second, it's still not gonna make me sick. I never really had problems with it, so I'm, I suppose, one of lucky ones.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, I do struggle a bit with motion sickness in some games. Some games I'm absolutely fine with, but then sometimes I'll take the headset off and I get that weird kind of distortion of the room.
Yeah, many people say that, and it lasts hours or a couple of hours for some people.
I mean, there was one time actually, I remember I actually had to lie down, and when I was lying down, the room was just spinning for so long. I mean, and generally I'm fine. Most VR games I'm fine. I played Box VR earlier for a couple of hours, absolutely fine. I played Ghost Giant, no problem at all. But then there'll be certain games I'll just literally I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to call anyone out.
I think some developers does as well better job. If they even have this fluid locomotion, they got some tricks and to make the people not feeling as sick. While some developers obviously sometimes they're not doing it as good. So I think those games are what tend to make people feel sick. And I think it's most of it's ports of flat games put in VR. So the games what wasn't designed for VR in mind, so they tend to make people more motion sick than anything else, I think.
Yeah, that's very true, actually, because obviously we're seeing that a lot more now, and we're also seeing VR games come over to flat screen, which is interesting as well. Yeah. So you've got that real kind of mix coming up now, where the game they're starting to merge more. But But yeah, it does. It obviously is going to impact it because like that initial control scheme was never designed for you to have that full freedom of movement. Compared, you were always going to have that static view on your TV set. But yeah, you're right. I've certainly noticed that in some releases before. Not all, but certainly some of them. But it's interesting.
I suppose Sprint Vector is not one of them in it because they've done a great job. And I think they as well add in that when you run, you've got, don't know how to call it, but you've got those lines like passing your face, like a wind or something. So I think that was added as well to not only to make you feel faster, but also to stop motion sickness. So I think they've had many tricks up their sleeve to make like fast racing game, but also the one that anyone can pick up and play.
Yeah, I think Servius were very smart with that in terms of they knew that that was a criticism of VR for many people. I mean, obviously, you say you're not one of them. I sometimes suffer with it, but not perhaps as extreme as others. But certainly, it was a criticism for some people that adoption is struggling to get into VR. And I think that's kind of an interesting we're trying to be exploring with this as well. It's not just about kind of exercise in VR. It's also about those who like to exercise but are looking for alternative ways and have thought about VR but are a little bit apprehensive because of the nausea and the sickness that might come accompanied with that.
Yeah, so especially those days, those developers some of them released many VR games already. So those days they're just getting better and better at it. So I mean, some people still might suffer from motion sickness, but for a lot of people it's just the case of playing for a few hours, couple of hours a day, or and getting used to it, and they're good to go from there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I suppose then when we're talking a bit more about Sprint Vector there, so you mentioned there it's like very much like a Mario Kart, but it's almost like I look at it like kind of like a Mario Kart crossed with a Smash TV, which is a really old game that I loved on my Mega Drive. So it's kind of like a very futuristic, mad TV show kind of style. I'm sure
I played it on Amiga. I can't recall now what I played it on.
Yeah, it's one of those classic games. I still remember the cover art to this day, like the blue and the red, like character on the front just combating. It's great. I love the old cover art on games. They were fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm off on a tangent, but you get to play as different characters. Like there's a hammer-headed shark in there called Hendrix. There's almost a ninja-like looking frog called Kai, which is interesting. And as we mentioned, the interesting comparison to Mario Kart, so you've got some power-ups, like obviously there's the nitro in there where you kind of like increase your speed. There's a missile power-up, which, if anyone has ever played Mario Kart at any point, the missile is your nemesis, especially that blue shell. Oh my God, that blue shell, man. But obviously they've implemented some of the little cool features as well. So like there's actually a power where you can go to the nearest checkpoint to the player that's just passed you. So like you can kind of get a bit of a foothold in the race. So there's some nice little features in there as well, fresh and interesting. And I say it does keep you active. There's lots of different motions. So there's the skate and sprint motions that use your arms. There's the turn motion. There's the climbing. So it's kind of like keeping you rooted to the spot, but you're doing different motions on the spot. Yeah. It's really interesting how that works. But I suppose when you're in the VR headset, you're seeing like the climbing, you're seeing the skating. So it's also
like cool. You feel cool doing it as well. And then in real life, you don't look so cool in it.
It was like Batman, right? When you first pull up, like you go and you go down and you feel like you're Batman. Yeah. It's like that mental trickery that kind of VR has is incredible. But yeah, as well, there's different difficulties as well. So obviously, as you mentioned with Box VR, there's different courses and there's different routines you can take and the difficulty on those. Sprint Vector has a similar thing. There's different difficulty style for each course. And there's challenge modes as well, which you can get into and dive into, which is really, really cool as well for fitness routines. But I think one of the things I wanted to touch upon is that it's also... This has actually been recognized as won an award as a VR fitness game, which I think is really fascinating because obviously we've kind of talked about how this isn't designed to be an exercise application, but it has won an award for being a VR fitness app. And it's fascinating how that like someone has at some point said, you know what, this is actually giving me a heck of a workout, and they've recommended it to someone and it's snowballed from there.
Yeah, it's a good design of the game because it makes you move like you would move in real life. If you was racing somebody, you would get tired, and so that's another example of very good VR design. I always like the games what lets you use your body in VR. It makes you feel more immersive. So yeah, that's Sprint Vector does it very well.
Yeah. it's fascinating. It's really, really cool to see that. And I think it's a real testament, as we said, to the quality of Sprint Vector as a game. It's really held its own. It still holds its own even now. But it's also, I think, one of the other interesting points about Sprint Vector is it's one of the very few multiplayer games in VR and one of the very few multiplayer fitness apps. So we asked a series of questions, and you're going to see those videos come out over the course of this. And we asked people, like, what your favorite multiplayer fitness app is. And I think 90% of the answers are probably going to be Sprint Vector. It's kind of a spoiler alert. But so yeah, it's interesting that no one has really kind of done much else in that space right now. I mean, do you think it's because people prefer to exercise alone? Do you think that there's not so much of that competitive edge, or you don't want to play with someone else?
Maybe it's due to exercising alone. I'm not sure, but and VR, of course, not as many people owns it yet as as they should. I think everyone should have one. So I think that's one point of it as well. But of course, every day people buying new headsets. We're hearing how well VR is doing. So we're gonna get there eventually. Yeah,
and it's PlayStation VR is still the cream of the crop at the moment in terms of the best selling VR headset.
Yeah.
But I think the Oculus Quest is creeping up there, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's standalone, easy to use. You just put it on your head. Got good controllers, no wires. So yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and obviously there's been a lot of headset sales in the last few months with Half-Life Alyx as well. Like the Valve Index has been selling a lot, and so there are a lot of people who are kind of like a Half-Life enthusiasts who will they will spend any money to play a new Half-Life game, and
that's true, yeah.
Fantastic game as well. I mean, if you haven't played it, you really should. It's amazing.
Yeah, I need to play it. I've got it. I bought it, but I've got my backlog on PC is massive, so I'm gonna play it eventually.
Are you one of those who buys games in the Steam sale and just keeps them there? Are you like me? Yeah.
I just see game and I buy it and I'm like, oh yeah, I play it later, and then later never comes because there's no time. But I'm sure one day eventually I play Alyx as well.
But yeah, so obviously back to Sprint Vector. This is it's one of the very few multiplayer VR apps. Absolutely amazing, and I think it's real testament to kind of what Survios have achieved, and what can be done in VR. And hopefully we see more multiplayer VR games that have kind of exercise implications to them as well, that you can add it to your routines. Because I think one thing we're really going to need, especially in this crisis at the moment, is that camaraderie with people. There's a lot of isolation in the world at the moment, like people living alone, or people being separated from their families.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that you find a way to kind of have some form of communication, whether that's through Zoom chats, whether that's through Skype chats or phone calls, emails, some way to kind of connect with other people. And maybe this could be a thing that could help with that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So if there was to be a sequel to Sprint Vector at some point, what would you like to see, and what do you think might make it better?
I don't know, maybe adding some flying, and you just fly with waving your hands, or maybe some swimming as well, like doing triathlon in VR. There's so much they can do.
Yeah. Actually, that's a thought. Have they really explored swimming? I can't think of a good swimming game in VR at the moment.
I've got one. I played it lately, finally, after Freediver. So that's the other month. I never had time to play it. I managed to play it. Thankfully, it's not too long. But they've got this motion option, so you can do proper swimming.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did you find it? Did you find it because I assume, can you swim? I don't know.
Yeah, I can swim.
Yeah.
It gets tiring eventually, but it's so immersive. That's the only option I'm using. But this game will keep you fit as well, your arms.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people who'd be desperate to go swim because, I suppose, people don't really think about it, but swimming is some people's core exercise. That's what they do day to day. And there's a lot less access to pools now than there's ever been. So
and being underwater in VR, it always feels good.
That probably feels quite trippy, actually.
I really enjoyed this game.
Cool. Well, that'll do it for Sprint Vector. We hope you enjoyed it. Keep your eye out for more content related to Sprint Vector over the coming days and weeks. Thanks for joining us once again. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again, Paul, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the nice video again. Weekend. It's been a week.
It's full week. We're absolutely exhausted. Take care, all. Thank you.